One model disappeared, another followed. And everything I once considered glamorous has now turned into a deadly game. I'm ready to uncover the truth, even if it costs me everything. My name is Emily Hart, and if you think I'm just your typical model with a figure perfect for glossy magazines, then, well, you're right. But you know what? Being a model isn't as glamorous as you might think. It's all like a fairy tale, just without the horse, but with a bunch of strange people in dark sunglasses and horrible outfits that no one would ever want to wear, including me. In my case, everything didn't start like with an ordinary model taking her first steps on the runway, but like a disaster in the style of Last Chance or The Last Day. I was standing on the runway in a dress that was so bizarre it might have been accidentally brought in from some failed quest called Night of the Living Fashionistas. The dress was a color I would describe as between marshmallow and burnt jelly. And, oh yes, in it I was supposed to be the star of the evening. I walked carefully, smiling at the camera, until I felt a gaze. The kind of gaze that leaves no room for doubt. As if I showed up at a party and discovered that someone ate the entire cake, leaving me with just one spoon. It wasn't terrible, but the feeling of hunger wouldn't go away, and then, with that unbearable gaze, I was heading back to the dressing room, thoughts running through my head. I hope I don't get sick from these wonderful outfits, when I found a note on my desk. Of course, I didn't notice it at first. There was a stack of papers and, apparently, some fast food leftovers. But the note caught my attention. On the scrap of paper was a phrase that immediately made me realize I needed to call a detective. "You're not alone. Be careful with the one who is always in the shadows," I thought. Oh, just another idiot trying to joke around. But, you know, when you find notes with threats on your desk, it's not just a joke. Well, I wasn't going to laugh in the face of someone who thought I was an idiot. There was something behind this, and so as I threw the note in the trash, maybe it was just an ad from a competitor, my colleague Max walked into the dressing room. Max was the kind of designer who clearly thought that the fashion world was more than just shoelaces and hair styling. His collections were so bizarre, even I didn't know how to describe them. Futurism mixed with apocalypse. Maybe Max looked at me as if I had just suggested he start a fashion trend for potato jackets. He propped his head up with his hand and said, "Emily, do you realize you're in danger?" And you know, in that moment I thought that if I didn't have to wear this dress, I might have laughed. But instead I just replied, "Listen, Max, I almost fainted on the runway, and you're telling me about danger. Maybe you're just stressed out. Imagine you arrive at work and find that your colleague is missing. I mean, completely missing." All that was left of Lisa. Yes, I decided to name her Lisa. Let's go with a European name, why not? Was her chair, an empty cup with coffee remnants, and her mobile phone, which, as it turned out, wasn't turned off. The battery just died. I would have thought she simply decided not to show up, if it weren't for one thing. She seemed to have vanished. "Do you know where Lisa is?" I asked my friend, an investigation partner. Well, almost a partner. He was a stylist and I'm a model. But who said those two types of people can't work together? He, Mick, just shrugged and looked around as if he himself didn't know what was going on. "She didn't show up for rehearsal, and in her place, it's empty. This is all strange. Did you see how she left yesterday? Like someone was following her." Mick's words hit me like a blow to the head. Lisa had always been the center of attention. Her career was picking up steam. And then, gone. Without a trace. Just like I thought at the moment of her absence, here it was, a real detective story right in the fashion world. "Mick, you always bring me so much joy," I said with a hint of sarcasm. "So what?" Maybe she just decided to take a vacation or get a tattoo. No one's stopping her. But then Max walked into the dressing room, the new designer who, by the way, kept his distance from everyone, as if he wanted to hide from his own ideas. Max was quite the type, with an unusually serious expression on his face and a no less serious style. His collection was, to put it mildly, strange, but still he worked, and if you had to work, you worked with him. Just don't ask unnecessary questions. He looked at me and said without blinking, "What? You don't know?" "Lisa didn't disappear just like that. She's not coming back. And neither are you." I was taken aback. "Wait, what do you mean?" Max's voice had such coldness that I felt like I'd just become part of some crazy quest. "Why is everyone in this fashion industry so dramatic? You don't get it, do you?" he continued. "This is not just a disappearance. It's not a coincidence. There's a real game starting around us, and you're in it too." I fell silent, processing the information. Max was always speaking in riddles, but this wasn't a joke anymore, and it wasn't the moment for laughter. In that instant I understood. If I don't find out what's going on, I'll end up at the center of something very unpleasant. I decided it was time to act. You know, when everything is happening fast and you can't just stand by. Too many strange coincidences. And if this is a game, I have to play. The only question is, who's behind whom in this game? And what should I do if I've just ended up being one of those who's supposed to investigate all of this? Well, where do you think I could be at this moment if not in the fashion industry? Just like in the movies, where detectives investigate murders in libraries with magnifying glasses, except instead of a magnifying glass, I'm holding cosmetics. And instead of a library, there's a dressing room smelling of toilet corner perfume and cups that say, "Best Stylist of the Year." I was scanning my colleagues, designers, models, and even those strange people we call staff. Each one had their own secret, and they all looked like they lived in a parallel universe where fashion wasn't just clothing, but a dangerous survival game. I decided I couldn't just sit idly by watching everyone disappear while I was left with this ridiculous stress and suspicions, as if I'd suddenly been given a ticket to an island with a crazy fashion designer. So I approached Mick and said, "Mick, I need a couple of things from you. First, a list of everyone who left after the show. Second, if you want me to look like I'm in a movie where everyone is whispering about your suspicions, find me a super stylish outfit for this investigation. I can't walk around the fashion show looking like a mouse in a pink dress, right?" He put down his powder puff, yes, I'm not joking, and looked at me as if I had just suggested he surrender to a dress made of broccoli. "You're not serious, are you? You've decided to become a detective?" he asked with the expression as if I had just suggested he eat all the moldy mushrooms in the fridge. "Of course not. I can't just sit here waiting to disappear like Lisa did," I replied, feeling my inner Sherlock Holmes return. Although Sherlock never showed up on the runway in a dress that you couldn't wear without a laugh. But that's a minor detail. Mick looked at me with suspicion, as if I had just said I was going to solve crimes with handkerchiefs. "You're already starting with suspicions, and Lisa was just on the weekend," he said. "Yeah, she was just on the weekend, and then her trail vanished like your failed sweater design from last year," I responded, immediately receiving a chuckle from everyone nearby. Oh yes, with a reputation like that, I was ready to be the leader of the detective quest. But things got even more interesting. In the hallway of the dressing room, I bumped into, yes, Max. He was all alone, as if he had just been released from some very fashionable monastery. Max was like a secret Jedi of the fashion universe, and no one knew what he actually did until the moment when, out of the blue, he suddenly shared his philosophical thoughts on colors and fabrics, and everyone around began seeing the world in a completely different light. "Emily, are you going to look for Lisa?" he asked, as if I were a contestant on the next episode of In Search of Failures. "Yeah, of course. If you want me to stop going on the runway in this dress, I'll have to find all the missing models first, and then figure out who's behind all this." Max stood up and perhaps was trying to be philosophically mysterious, But at that moment, his gaze was so intense that I almost thought he was about to reveal all the secrets of the universe, or at least tell me where to buy some decent shoes that don't slip. "Do you even realize that you're playing with fire?" he said, looking like he was about to unveil the secrets of the fashion world. "You're like a woman who accidentally wandered into a dungeon but hasn't decided yet what to do with the monster hiding there." "Oh, let's skip the metaphors, Max. You're scaring me. In fashion, by the way, you should be looking for shoes that don't hurt, not monsters. While I'm looking for your monster, at least tell me who else disappeared." "Lisa didn't disappear by accident." Max paused for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "And you shouldn't have come here either." I became curious. Did he think I was supposed to be his ally in this game? If so, here I am, totally unprepared for the fact that behind this fashion world there was a whole system of secrets and puzzles. "Listen, Max, are you going to tell me where Lisa is?" I couldn't hide my curiosity anymore, like a detective about to crack the case. Max looked at me like I was a fool who had just opened a box of pies and hadn't realized it was a trap. "You'd better be careful. You're already tangled up, Emily," he said, and disappeared down the hallway. At that moment, I realized one simple thing. If you want to figure out the fashion world, be prepared to face the most mysterious and absurd things it has to offer. For example, in my situation, with Max, who seemed to secretly be an agent of international fashion intelligence, but instead of weapons, he wore woolen sweaters that were impossible to determine the era they belonged to. While I was trying to figure out his metaphors and also trying to figure out where Lisa had disappeared to, a brilliant thought suddenly struck me. I could be more than just a model. I could be a real detective. And honestly, I already started seeing my life as the script for the new season of Fashion Detective. I immediately pictured myself in a stylish outfit with a mysterious smile, while everything around me would spin to the sound of starry fairy dust. There was just one problem. I didn't have even the basic skills of an investigator. I didn't know how to solve mysteries, didn't know how to use a magnifying glass, although maybe I should have, and in general, well, who in their right mind would go looking for missing people in a world where even the simplest question becomes the accessory of the year? But I wasn't going to give up. I came to this world not to be just another model, but to become famous and expose everyone who was hiding something in this world. "So, shall we start?" I thought, and confidently headed towards the dressing room where Mick and I were supposed to begin our next stage of the search. But there was something strange there. In front of the mirror stood the very person I was going to talk to earlier, Jonathan. He was one of the designers whose collections could be called masterpieces, if not for one thing. Every time I looked at his work, I somehow felt like squinting and tilting my head to the side. His style was so bizarre that I doubted I was ready for such art. But what really alarmed me was the look in his eyes, which seemed to say, "You definitely don't want to know what I'm about to tell you. Could you at least wait a little?" Jonathan looked at me as if I had suddenly popped out of his mind. I walked closer, hoping this wouldn't turn into yet another strange situation related to my colorful outfits. "I thought you were busy designing, Jonathan, not spying on models," I said, holding back a smile that was trying to escape. He almost broke into a grin, but immediately returned to his serious demeanor. "I'm not spying, I'm just trying to predict the future." "How?" "Through modeling." I couldn't help myself. His passion for predictions seemed to go beyond fabric selection, but Jonathan was a master of strange statements, and, to be honest, I was curious where he was going with this. "Listen, Emily." He moved closer to me. "You're looking for Lisa, but I'll tell you one thing. You started too late. She disappeared for a reason you don't understand, and you'll be in danger too if you're not careful." I stepped back sharply. It was as if his words pierced through me. Could this all be true? I never thought being a model could be so dangerous. "What do you mean?" I finally asked, genuinely interested in his words. We exchanged looks, and in his eyes I saw something that made me feel like I had fallen into a trap from which I wouldn't escape. You don't realize who you're dealing with, Emily. The world of fashion isn't just about shows and glamour. It's a dangerous game, and those behind it are willing to do anything to maintain their power. What are you talking about? I couldn't hide my confusion again. That Lisa is just the beginning. There are more missing models hiding behind her. And I'm sure you'll disappear too if you keep looking for answers, he said, and left, leaving me in complete shock. Well, here I am. I see now that this world isn't so glamorous. All of it turned out to be not just a fashion spectacle, but a real survival game. When I left the dressing room, one thought kept spinning in my head. What the hell, Jonathan? He spoke so mysteriously that I almost felt like the heroine of a spy thriller, only without guns and in a dress that I still plan to wear. After all, if you're a model, even in the middle of an investigation, you need to keep it together, at least on the outside. It was hard not to notice how strange my colleagues were acting. Everyone was avoiding me, like I was carrying some sort of fashion disease. Everything looked like someone didn't want me investigating the mysterious disappearance of Lisa. But who? While I was gathering my thoughts, Mick approached me with another portion of fashion advice. Honestly, I always thought that if there were a fashion game called Spy Play, Mick would be the champion. He always seemed to have an answer to every question. Not just an answer, but a solution for hairstyling and accessories as well. Emily, he almost whispered so no one could hear. You know all these fashionable things are just a cover. This entire industry is like a stylish hat. It looks cool, but in reality, it hides something far more dangerous. Mick, what are you talking about? I was starting to get confused by his metaphors. First models disappear, now hats. He clearly wanted to confuse me, but it wouldn't work. Don't you get it? Lisa didn't just disappear. This is all a bigger game, and you're pulled into it. If you don't want to become part of this mysterious game, you'd better step back, Mick said, stepping away with an expression like his warnings were a magical formula, and he had just awakened some ancient evil. Oh, come on, Mick. If you knew how many times I've seen those dangerous people with hats at fashion shows, you wouldn't be saying this is a game, I replied with a smirk. But Mick kept looking at me like I was about to commit a fashion crime, and he was on the path to solving it. At first, I thought his predictions were just a way to scare me, but the further I went down this path, the more I began to think he might be right, and that's when it became clear. If I wanted to unravel all these mysteries, I needed to go to where it all started, the runway. I headed for the hall where the designers and models were gathering again. This time I had to be ready for any surprise because, as it turned out, the fashion world wasn't just full of beauty, but also secret games that no one could interfere with, especially if you didn't wear a stylish hat or, in my case, didn't understand all the fashion tricks. In the hall, I noticed everyone waiting for the next show, and among those yellow spotlight lights I saw her. Carla. She was one of the most famous models in the industry, and I had always thought she was quite cold and a bit arrogant. But now her eyes were full of anxiety, and I realized that she was hiding something too. In this world, everyone hides something, but sometimes eyes speak louder than words. Emily, Carla approached me, her voice tense. Are you seriously going to investigate the disappearances? Don't play with fire. This isn't for you. I looked at her with such serious suspicion that she seemed to pale a little. What do you mean, Carla? Are you also part of this game? I couldn't help asking, although I knew that everyone around me wasn't just playing in the fashion industry. I can't tell you that. Her voice was quiet, and I almost didn't hear her answer. You have no idea what might happen if you open that door. What door? I exclaimed. Carla sighed and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me with even more doubts than before. Questions swirled in my head. What is she hiding? Why is she so scared? What could be so terrifying that even the most confident models start to fear? At that moment, I realized, if I don't figure this out, I too will become part of this strange game, and perhaps I will disappear. As soon as Carla disappeared into the crowd, I felt that the number of mysteries was growing too fast to handle in one evening. Everyone had their secrets, and it seemed like I had ended up at the center of this grim world, where everyone knew what lay behind the glamorous outfits and the faces of the models. Honestly, I didn't like the fact that now I was part of this club, too. I decided that I needed to find more information. Where did Lisa go? Why did she just vanish? And what was Carla trying to tell me but never did? But the more I tried to figure it out, the more it seemed that all these mysteries were merging into one big problem, and one day I would find myself in a situation from which I wouldn't be able to escape. Soon after Carla disappeared, Max approached me. He seemed completely calm, but I knew that behind this mask there was something far more serious, and from the look in his eyes I could tell he was ready to reveal to me part of what I was supposed to understand. "Emily, I know you want to figure this out, but if you keep going, you could be next. You don't understand what you're doing," he said. I was, of course, a bit shocked, but immediately responded, "Are you trying to scare me too, like Carla?" I smirked, but inside I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. "You know the fashion world isn't what you think. People here will do anything for success, for their careers. It's not just dresses and shoes. It's a box of secrets that no one opens. But you've already started to unravel it," he said, and in his voice was something that made me feel even more cautious. "So, what are you suggesting, Max?" "Not looking for Lisa." I couldn't hold back the sarcasm, but Max, without blinking, continued, "I'm asking you to stop. Please. If you keep going, you'll end up in a trap, and I'm not sure I can save you." I paused. Max wasn't the kind of person who would say such things lightly. He knew something that I was supposed to understand, and as much as I didn't want to believe that all of this was just a silly game, I couldn't ignore his warnings. But then I noticed something strange. On the table, near the spot where I was sitting, was a note. It was completely inconspicuous, as if someone had purposely left it for me to notice. The scrap of paper read, "They know what you're looking for, and they won't let you rest until they destroy your secret. Leave before it's too late." I jumped back as if the note were a living thing, ready to strike me. Who left this? And why should I leave? This was another threat, just like the one I received at the beginning. But now I understood that the threat was real. For a moment I sat in confusion, not knowing what to do with this note. It was clear that I needed to act. I couldn't just take this and forget about everything. If I didn't figure out who was behind the disappearances, I'd end up among the missing. But then, suddenly, a bright thought hit me. I needed to find Lisa. This was the only way to end this game, if it ever ends. And I also thought I should talk to Carla. Maybe she could offer some advice, since her unease clearly wasn't without reason. I stood up, clenched the note in my hand, and headed toward the backstage area, where we usually left our things. I needed to find answers, and I knew I couldn't stop, despite all the warnings. And then, as I turned the corner, I came face to face with another surprise. Standing before me was the woman who had never appeared in our group before. Vanessa. She was a model known for keeping her distance from everyone, despite her absolute popularity. "Emily." Vanessa smiled, but her smile wasn't the usual one. It was cold, almost forced. "You're looking for answers, aren't you? But what are you hoping to find? The truth or an illusion?" I stood frozen. "What do you mean?" I could barely hold back from laughing at her cryptic words. "You already know everything. You understand that the fashion world isn't just a career. It's a game where those who win aren't the prettiest, but those who know how to hide their secrets. You understand that, right? My heart was beating faster. I felt that every word she said was worth its weight in gold, and that she hadn't just appeared at this moment by chance. "But why have you been silent until now?" I asked, already ready to listen to her answers. "Because you weren't ready to know the truth. But if you want to be ready, I'll help you. Just don't tell anyone about our conversation," Vanessa said and disappeared into the shadows. I stood there, stunned. What did she mean? Why did she say that? I still didn't know that this was only the beginning. Time passed, and with it, my resolve to unravel this mystery grew stronger. At the moment when Vanessa disappeared as mysteriously as she had appeared, I realized that everything had gotten much worse than I could have imagined. The world of fashion wasn't just about dresses and shoes. It was some kind of labyrinth where everyone followed their own rules. And I seemed to have fallen into this game, not knowing what cards I had in my hand. Just this morning, I thought an investigation was something out of the movies, where cool detectives untangle complex cases. But, as it turned out, being a model and trying to uncover the mystery of a colleague's disappearance was like playing chess with a tiger. The tiger would definitely know when you'd make a mistake, and you, on the other hand, wouldn't even realize why you were eaten. Now I had not only a mysterious note from an unknown source, but also more and more questions. Where was Lisa? Why did she disappear? And why was everyone who knew something keeping silent like fish? Was I the only one ready to go all the way? I need to act fast, I told myself, and looking at my reflection in the mirror, I caught myself thinking that I looked more like a mannequin who decided to become a secret agent than a detective. But no matter what I told myself, I couldn't afford to doubt. Thoughts kept swirling in my head. If Lisa is missing, and if all these strange disappearances aren't just coincidences, then I need to find out who's behind all this. Maybe it's not just the fashion industry. Maybe someone wants to make sure I don't find out the truth. And I need to find out who. I decided that if I wanted to find Lisa, I had to look where no one would expect me to, right at the heart of the fashion show. I understood that it was risky, but I had no other choice. I was already pulled into the game, and now the only way to get out was to figure out what was going on. I stepped into the corridor and approached Max. He was standing by the window, staring off into the distance. He looked as if he had seen everything and didn't want to know anything more. "Max," I walked up to him, deciding to take action. "You said Lisa didn't just disappear. What did you mean?" He turned to me and exhaled. "Emily, if you want the truth, be ready that you won't be able to just walk away. This isn't a game, and if you open one door, all the others will open, and you won't be ready." I felt a chill run down my spine. What did he mean? What secret was behind all of this? And why was everyone who knew something trying to scare me off? "You're hiding something, Max," I said, determined. "Why are you so afraid? Do you think I won't be able to figure this out?" Max looked at me intently. "You don't understand what's behind this. It's not just a show, not just dresses. It's much more than you think." "What more?" I couldn't hold back my curious gaze. "And why aren't you telling me what's going on?" Max took a deep breath, as if he had made a decision. "Lisa didn't just disappear. She's part of something much more dangerous. You're not ready to understand what it is, but if you insist, I'll tell you what I know. But only if you're really ready." I nodded. My heart was racing. This was the strangest situation of my life, and every look from him made me more confident that I was on the right path. "What do you know?" I asked impatiently. Max stepped back a bit as though preparing to reveal some terrifying secret. "You've already entered this world, Emily. You've become part of the system, and they won't let you leave. It's not just the disappearance of models. It's a fight for power. Power over this world. You're saying that behind all of this are the people who control the fashion industry." I tried to make sense of his words. Max nodded. Yes, and now you're in this game too. If you want to survive, you need to act very carefully. Otherwise, they'll do to you what they did to Lisa. My breath became shallow, and I felt my legs weaken. If everything he was saying was true, I hadn't just landed in a fashion show. I had landed in some kind of sinister game that wasn't easy to escape from. What should I do? I finally asked. Max shrugged. It's your choice, Emily. You can leave, try to forget everything, or you can try to uncover all the secrets. But be careful. As soon as he finished speaking, I realized I couldn't leave. I had to understand what was behind this world before I got pulled into an even deeper trap. Well, now I found myself at the very center of the game. Not just the fashion game, but a game where every move could cost you your life. Max was right, and I knew I couldn't back down. I was in this story up to my neck, and despite all the warnings, I couldn't stop. The fashion world, as it turned out, wasn't just about sparkle and glamour. It was a world where strange secrets, dangers, and, who would have thought, hats with secrets lurked around every corner. And, strangely enough, I started to feel that this was not the world I had entered willingly. This was a world I had been dragged into, even if I hadn't wanted to be. As I tried to solve all these puzzles, my head kept spinning. Who was behind this? Why did Lisa disappear? And what made this whole fashion world so ominous? I decided that I needed to go back to where it all started, to the runway, to the place where I first felt that something wasn't right. I couldn't just sit back and hope for the best. Everything that was happening was too important to ignore. You need to be there, I told myself, looking at my reflection in the mirror and raising my chin. If I'm going to be a detective, I won't be mumbling in a corner. Before I could even think about what real detectives looked like, Mick approached me. He seemed even more nervous than usual. "Why so serious?" he asked, noticing my determined expression. "You really decided to take this investigation seriously." "Yes, Mick, I did. And I won't stop until I solve this mystery. You can laugh, but I know there's more to this than just coincidence. This is a game. And I'm in it," I said, looking at him confidently, though I was still a bit scared inside. "Oh, now this is interesting," he smirked. "Well, if you're going to be a detective, you'll need something a bit more serious than just lipstick and nice clothes." He winked at me. "Maybe you should adopt your own investigative style." I looked at him, not quite understanding what he meant, when he suddenly pulled out of his bag a magnifying glass. Yes, a magnifying glass. It was huge and bright, just like something out of old Sherlock Holmes movies. "Here you go," he said with a serious look. "Now you're a real detective. No excuses." I couldn't help but laugh. Well, yes, now I was a real detective, albeit with a somewhat unconventional tool. But hey, in fashion there are all kinds of accessories, and a magnifying glass was definitely something else. "Thanks, Mick. I'm ready to investigate now," I said, still laughing. Mick and I headed to the hall where all the designers and models were gathering. As soon as we entered, the atmosphere was tense. It felt like everyone there knew something important, but no one wanted to share it. It was as if they were about to attend a meeting of some secret club, and I felt like a spy hiding in the shadows. "So, Mick," I said, glancing around at everyone, "if we're looking for answers, we need to start with the darkest corners of this show. Maybe there's someone here who knows more than they're letting on." He nodded and took out his notebook, ready to jot down any details that might prove useful. "Let's start with what you actually plan to find out, Emily. Who do you think might be behind this disappearance?" I thought for a moment about how best to approach this situation. After all, this wasn't just a show. There were people behind this who might be hiding a lot. And if I wanted to know the truth, I would have to shed light on the darkest corners of the fashion industry. "I think we should start with those who are in plain sight, but don't talk too much. Designers who seem too calm and confident, as if they're hiding something important. Like Jonathan. We started moving toward his corner, and as we got closer, I noticed how he was quickly jotting something down in his notebook, not wanting to meet my gaze. That could only mean one thing. He was hiding something. I approached him, and he looked up, seeing me. The smile disappeared from his face, and I felt his breath become shallow. "Jonathan," I said with a light smile, "mind if we talk for a bit?" He glanced briefly at me, then at Mick. "Of course, Emily," he replied with unnatural ease. "What do you want to talk about?" "About Lisa. You've known her for quite a while, so maybe you know where she might have gone." I stared at him, trying to read his reaction. He froze for a moment, his face turning pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Lisa just left." "Are you serious? You and I both know Lisa didn't just leave, so stop lying. Tell me what you're hiding." I couldn't hold back my irritation. I was ready to know the truth, even if it meant spending the whole night doing so. Jonathan stood before me, as pale as a sheet of paper. It was as if he knew that at some point I would figure everything out, but he clearly wasn't ready to face it so quickly. His gaze darted around the room, and he clearly wanted to leave but couldn't. He knew that his secrets would soon be exposed. "You don't understand, Emily," he finally said, squinting his eyes. "You're not ready to know the whole truth. This isn't something you can handle." I stepped closer to him, slightly tilting my head to show that I wasn't going to back down. "You, Jonathan, seem to be really good at manipulating people, but I won't accept this. I didn't come here to play your games. I want the truth. You're going to tell me where Lisa is, and how you're involved in this." His face remained still, but I could see his hands nervously fiddling with the edge of his shirt. He was clearly anxious. I didn't wait any longer and took the next step. "You're hiding something. Why are you reacting like this?" Silence. Oh, how I hate this silence in moments like this. Finally, Jonathan swallowed and, nervously glancing at us with Mick, spoke. "Lisa disappeared because she found out something she shouldn't have. We all know that the world of fashion is not just about success and style. It hides dark sides that no one should know about. Lisa tried to figure out what's really going on, and now she's gone." I froze. Everything I had expected to hear turned my understanding of the fashion industry upside down. I had tried to find confirmation that everything around me was just a coincidence, but it seemed I had stumbled into something much more serious. "You're telling me that you and everyone else here are involved in things that could cost Lisa her life?" I asked, trying to grasp the scale of what he had just said. Jonathan exhaled nervously. "Not exactly, but yes. In our world, there are rules. And if you try to break those rules, you become a target." I felt the cold creeping in. The deeper I got into this web of secrets and lies, the more I realized that I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't leave it like this. Lisa wasn't the only one who had fallen into the trap of this world. I had become part of this game too, and now I had to decide whether I would be the victim or the one who uncovers all the secrets. "You're saying the rules are broken. Who sets them? And who else is involved in this?" I asked, trying to piece together this complicated puzzle. "I can't say any more. I can't. Do you understand?" Jonathan raised his hands in helplessness, as if he was searching for help. "You don't realize who you're dealing with right now. I can't help you. If you want to live, you'd better back off." Mick, who had been standing a little to the side watching the whole scene, stepped closer to me and quietly said, "Emily, maybe we should wait on this. We've gone too deep." But I couldn't turn back now. This wasn't just an investigation, it was my future, and I was already deeply involved in this game. I had to continue. "No," I said, clearly feeling that now I couldn't stop. "I can't just leave, Mick. We're too close to the answer." At that moment, I realized that the future I had imagined no longer existed. I had become entangled in a web, and even if I wanted to break free, everything around me would become even more dangerous. "Are you sure you're ready, Emily?" Mick repeated, his voice filled with concern. "Yes, I'm ready," I answered decisively. And maybe it was a mistake, maybe it wasn't, but I knew there was no turning back. I approached Jonathan, who stood before me, and said, "You're going to tell us the whole truth, Jonathan, but only if you want your name not to end up on the list of the missing. I don't know who came up with the idea that being a model is an easy life. Maybe it was someone who had never been at the heart of the fashion scene, not knowing what happens behind the curtains. But as I realized now, being a model wasn't just about long legs and beautiful dresses. It was also about dangers hiding around every corner. And if you don't know how to read between the lines, you might find yourself not just in a new look, but in a completely different world. I stood in front of the mirror in the empty dressing room, trying to organize my thoughts. Jonathan had told me that Lisa disappeared because she tried to uncover the hidden secrets of the fashion world. But what he said didn't match what I had seen on the surface. Fashion wasn't just a career. It was a maze where not only models but entire lives got lost. And if I didn't start unraveling all the mysteries, I would most likely become one of those victims. At that moment, there was a quiet knock on the door, and before I could say anything, Max entered the dressing room. He looked even more worried than before. His eyes darted around the room as if he was looking for something but couldn't find it. "You've decided to act, huh?" he asked, approaching me and carefully inspecting me, as though he suddenly decided to become my personal bodyguard. "You understand that everything you're doing now could turn into a disaster." "Well, Max," I replied with a smirk, though something inside me was tightening, "if you're not going to help, I'll do it myself." "You don't understand, Emily," he sighed, and his voice became even quieter. "You don't even know what you're getting into. You think this is all just a game, some thriller with a happy ending, but you're wrong." He stepped closer, and I felt his words penetrate deep into me. I couldn't ignore what he was saying. He knew more than I could imagine. And not just knew, he felt it inside. "Max, what do you know?" I could barely hold the nervousness in my voice. "Why are you afraid for me? If you want me to stop, tell me what's really going on. Why are you staying silent?" He turned to me and finally spoke. "I can't tell you everything because you're not ready. But if you keep looking, you won't find peace. You'll become part of something you won't be able to escape. I'm telling you this not to scare you. I'm telling you this so you understand that you can't just keep going." I felt a chill run through me, but not out of fear, more out of the realization that I had already crossed a line, one that I couldn't go back from. I couldn't just stop now. "I can't stop, Max," I said, my voice full of determination. "You understand that this isn't just a job for me. This is a chance. I need to know the truth." He stepped back and stared at me for a long time, as if deciding whether or not to continue this conversation. Then, suddenly, he said, "I can't help you anymore, Emily. This is your path. But remember, they're always watching. If you uncover their secrets, you'll lose everything." I couldn't say a word. Max was probably right. I could lose everything I held dear if I continued searching for the truth. But if I stopped, I would never know what was really happening in this fashion world. I looked at Max, and there was something in his eyes that I couldn't understand. It was as if he too was part of this game, and now he was trying to save me from becoming a part of it. "I'm still going to continue, Max," I said, not taking my eyes off him. "I'm going to solve this mystery, and if it costs me something, I'll be ready to pay." He was silent, and I realized I wouldn't get any more from him. Max was right, but I couldn't allow myself to stop. I don't know how it happened, but I found myself at the epicenter of events, where with every step the air around me became thinner, and with every turn the doubts grew stronger. Max was right, and now I knew for sure I could no longer go back. The fashion industry, which I had fallen in love with, hid dark corners that didn't just scare me, they consumed me. With each passing day, I became more convinced that I wasn't here by accident. Lisa had disappeared because she had learned too much, and I was ready to learn as much, maybe even more. I couldn't let this world trap me without giving me answers. No, I was ready to go all the way, and now there was only one thing left to do. I had to gain the trust of those who might be hiding something. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my phone and dialed the number. This was my last chance, the last moment when I could change everything. On the other end of the line was Robert. Robert was a former designer I had known long before I started modeling. He was a cool designer, and I had always considered him a friend. We had worked together, exchanged ideas, but one day he disappeared. He literally vanished after telling me he was leaving the fashion industry because he couldn't take it anymore. But at the time, I didn't think to question why. When the phone finally answered, I heard his voice. All I had to do now was be straightforward. "Robert, I need to talk to you. You know what's going on here. I understand everything. Help me." He was silent for a moment, as if trying to assess what I was saying. Then I heard his calm, almost emotionless response. "You don't understand, Emily. You've gotten yourself into something with no way out, and you're definitely not ready for everything I'm going to tell you." "I'm ready," I replied confidently. "I can't just sit and wait. I want to know the truth." "You want the truth? Fine. Come to me. But be ready. You won't find out everything right away. And you don't know what you'll face," said Robert, then added, "You shouldn't be doing this, but if you've already decided, then I can't help you any other way." His words didn't shock me. On the contrary, I understood that, despite his warnings, I was ready to find out what was hidden behind this impenetrable wall of fashion. "Where are you?" I asked, gathering my courage. He gave me the address, and I felt everything inside me tense up. It was like venturing into unknown territory. I knew that if I went there, my life would never be the same. But stopping was impossible. When I arrived at his apartment, I felt uneasy. I thought I knew Robert, but now everything had changed. He opened the door, and his expression was serious, as if he knew this conversation would change everything. "You came," he said, inviting me into the room. "Well, you didn't back down. That's both good and bad at the same time." We sat down at the table. Robert poured wine into 2 glasses, but didn't drink. "Emily, you don't understand who you've gotten involved with. I know you want the truth, but the truth here is dangerous. The world of fashion isn't just about style and shows. It's a battle for power." I clenched the glass in my hand. "I know you wanted to leave the business, but why didn't you tell me about it? What are you hiding?" He was silent for a moment, then looked at me with a heavy sigh. "I couldn't tell you. You were part of this. But you didn't know how it all worked. I tried to leave, but they forced me to stay." "Forced?" I felt my heart race. "Who? Who forced you to stay?" "The people behind all of this." He looked me in the eye. "You want to know who they are? These are the people who control fashion, but not through style. They control it through money and secrets. And if you want to be part of this world, you have to understand that behind it all lies not just success. It's a game, and if you don't play by the rules, you'll disappear." I tried to process his words. The secrets he had been hiding started falling out like puzzle pieces, and the more I listened, the clearer it became. Everything I had seen up until now was just the tip of the iceberg. "I understand," I said, though I didn't fully comprehend. "But what do I do now? If you're right, and if someone powerful is behind all this, who can control this world? How do I find out who they are?" "Don't try, Emily," he said, sighing. "You won't be able to handle it. But if you insist, I'll tell you what I know. This isn't just a fashion business, it's a chain that no one wants to break. I knew he was telling the truth, and I understood that I was on the edge. But there was no way back. If I didn't figure out this world, I would just become another lost model. And if I didn't uncover the secret, I might end up among those no one ever finds. I sat at the table, the wine already gone down to the last drop, and although I wasn't used to staying in one place for so long, I wasn't in the mood for fun. Robert looked at me with exhaustion, like a man who had known all of this truth for a long time, but perhaps didn't want to reveal it. I could feel him choosing his words, as if each one was dangerous. "You know, Emily," he finally spoke, "I tried to leave for a long time. I thought I could quit all of this. But if you want to get out of this game alive, you need to learn to see things differently. Fashion isn't just something you wear, it's a weapon. And behind every step, there's someone ready to do anything." I gulped down the last of my glass and set it down on the table, pushing it aside. I needed to focus. These words were beginning to sound familiar, like a whisper I had heard in my head when I first started searching for answers. "What do you mean, Robert? Who are these people? Why didn't you tell me about this earlier?" I asked a question that had been tormenting me for a long time. He fell silent again, but then exhaled, as if everything he was about to say required courage. I didn't know what to do. None of this is what it seems. These people, they're not just businessmen. They're controllers who manage everything, from the runways to advertising campaigns. They make sure you can't survive if you don't play by their rules. Their names can't be revealed because they already control everything around you. Even you. I felt Robert's words tighten around my chest. I couldn't believe that behind this whole world there was something far bigger than just competition or ambition. This was a system I probably shouldn't have gotten involved with. "Are you talking about some kind of conspiracy?" I couldn't believe I was asking such questions. "What are you talking about?" Robert looked at me with sadness in his eyes. "You have no idea how far they can go, Emily. You think you're just participating in fashion shows and photo shoots, but in reality, you're becoming part of their plan. All of this is controlled by someone in the shadows. They decide who becomes a star and who disappears." Lisa. She was one of those who tried to figure out who was behind all of this, and now she's gone. She wasn't the first, and you won't be the last. I clenched my fist, feeling the adrenaline pumping through my veins. Was I really so naive to think all of this was just a coincidence? I had to go all the way, despite all the fear and threats. "How do I get out of this game?" I asked, looking Robert in the eyes. "If you know how all of this works, tell me what to do." He fell silent for a moment, as if weighing my words, then answered, "You need to find those who control everything. But know this, they won't wait. And if you figure out who's behind it, you might find yourself trapped. But if you decide to go all the way, you must be ready for any outcome." "And what do I do if I decide to know everything?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I was ready. Robert looked at me with such heaviness in his eyes that I felt uneasy. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked to the door. As he reached the door, he turned to me. "None of us leaves here unscathed. If you decide to do this, know that no one will be waiting for you at the exit." With those words, he disappeared behind the door, leaving me alone with this dark world. After my conversation with Robert, it became clear. I could no longer turn back. I was like a chess piece already trapped, and now all I could do was move forward. I couldn't just walk away and forget everything I had learned. Lisa had disappeared, and I couldn't stay on the sidelines, knowing there was something bigger behind it all. The dark corridor I was in was no longer just part of the fashion show. It was a maze where every step could lead me to an answer or an even bigger nightmare. I tried not to think about what Robert had told me, but his words echoed in my head. "You won't leave here unscathed." I stepped into the main hall. This whole world was like an illusion, the glamour, the shine, all of which made it impossible to understand what lay behind these beautiful facades. Models walked down the runway, smiled, and posed for the cameras, but I felt that behind this scene there were secrets that no one dared to reveal. Everyone was like an actor playing their part. I noticed Jonathan, who was standing by the stage, watching the models. His gaze was tense but calm, as always. He looked as though everything happening around him didn't matter at all. But I knew that behind this mask there was something more. He knew I wouldn't stop, and his silence was another confirmation for me. I approached him, and he only noticed me when I was already close. A faint smile flashed across his face, which didn't hide his anxiety. "Emily," he said, raising an eyebrow. "So you decided to play this game, huh?" "I'm not playing, Jonathan," I replied, looking straight into his eyes. "I'm going to figure this out, and you're going to help me." His face turned cold, and his gaze became sharper than ever. "You don't understand what you've signed up for. I tried to warn you. You're still not answering my questions. Where is Lisa?" I couldn't hold the tension inside any longer. I needed answers, and right now they were more important than anything else. Jonathan took a deep breath, as if his words could hurt him more than they would hurt me. He was ready to tell me something, but at that moment his gaze swept across the room, and I noticed that he was looking around. Suddenly, his face changed. He grabbed my hand and pulled me aside. "Come with me. Now is not the time for talk." We hurried out of the hall, and as soon as we were in a secluded corner, Jonathan released me. He looked very worried. "You don't understand, Emily. I can't help you. You've gone too far. You need to leave while you still have a chance." His voice was quiet and frightened. "Why? Are you hiding something?" I could barely hold back my frustration. Jonathan lowered his head, as if unsure where to start. "I can't tell you anymore. You've become part of something much bigger than you think. And if you don't stop, it will be your end." I felt a chill run down my spine. I couldn't stop. I had to know what was behind all of this, even if it meant facing something I couldn't even imagine. I stood in the corner, contemplating Jonathan's words. This was the moment when all my fears and doubts sharpened. He was right. I had indeed become part of something much bigger than just a model on the runway. But what exactly? And who was behind all of this? How many people were hiding in the shadows, controlling this world? But even more importantly, I couldn't just leave now. Too much was at stake. Lisa had disappeared, and I couldn't afford to stay on the sidelines. I had to find the truth. Instead of continuing the conversation with Jonathan, I headed toward where I would meet those who might have the answers. Mick probably didn't know all the details, but he could help me understand what was happening here. I made my way to his office, hoping he would at least explain what was behind the closed doors. Mick had always been my friend, but when I saw him that day, I realized that a lot had changed. He didn't look like the person I had once shared my thoughts and feelings with. His eyes were tense, and there was no longer that confidence on his face that he used to greet me with. "What's happened, Mick?" I asked, walking up to him. "You know something, and I can't understand you." He looked at me, then glanced at the door, as if making sure no one was listening. "Emily, you need to be careful. You don't know who you've gotten involved with. This isn't just business, it's a real trap. I thought you understood what you were getting into." "What are you talking about?" I couldn't understand why Mick was so worried. "Are you afraid to help me? If you know something, tell me. I need to figure this out." Mick took a deep breath and finally spoke. "They control everything. The fashion world, the runways, the brands, even us. You think you're just a model, but in reality you're a puppet. Me, you, and all of us, we're part of a big game. And those who control it all, they will never stop. They know who can interfere." I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. I had fallen into something much more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Mick was right. I had become part of a game where the stakes were too high to simply walk away. What do? I asked, trying to gather my thoughts. How do I get out of this game? Mick lowered his eyes and looked at the door again, as if wanting to make sure no one could hear us. You can't leave. You've already gone too deep. But there's a chance if you act fast. I was ready for anything, even if it meant leaving everything I knew behind to escape this world. But what did I need to do? I need to meet with those who control everything, I said, feeling the pressure mount with every word. Tell me who they are. Mick looked at me with concern, but then nodded. You need to find the one who's behind all of this. They control everything, but you won't find them unless you act quickly. I nodded, and without waiting for more words, turned and headed for the exit. There were no rules on this path, only goals and fear. I was ready to find out who was behind all of this, but was I ready for the consequences? The moment Carla left, I felt the doors closing behind me, the ones that would never open again. I knew the answers lay deep in the heart of this fashion industry. But what exactly was the game? Why was everyone so cautious? Why did it seem like everyone on the runway knew what was going on, but no one dared to tell me? Carla was gone, and I stood in the center of the vast hall, which had just been full of life and movement. Now, everything was silent, and I was alone in this huge, cold space. Every step I took brought me closer to the center of this dark network I was trying to unravel. But what if I was wrong? What if, in my search for the truth, I had already become part of something much bigger than just investigating Lisa's disappearance? I stepped aside and made my way to backstage. It was dark, but I had already gotten used to the darkness, to the shadowy world I had become entangled in. But the more I realized that I had walked into this trap, the less I wanted to find the answers. However, there was no turning back now. When I got to backstage, I noticed a familiar face. It was Jason, one of the senior designers. He had always seemed too confident, but also suspiciously secretive. I approached him, and he looked at me with an expression that suggested he knew I was there for some special reason. "You're still here?" Jason asked, but there was neither surprise nor anger in his voice. He was just stating a fact. "I'm looking for the truth," I said, holding myself back from revealing the fear I felt inside. "Do you know what's going on? Do you know what happened to Lisa?" Jason glanced around as if checking to make sure no one was listening, and upon noticing we were safe, he sighed. "You don't understand this, Emily. You've already gotten caught in their web, and if you continue, it'll be too late. We've all become their puppets," he said, shaking his head as if he didn't believe what was happening. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Was everything really as they said? And if so, who were they, the ones controlling all of us? "Who are they, Jason?" I asked, though I knew any answer could now be dangerous. But I couldn't stop myself. "You want to know the truth?" Jason looked at me with a heavy expression on his face, and I saw him slightly shake his head. "You're already part of the game, but if you want to know more, you need to be ready. Everything you see here is an illusion. Behind every runway, every dress, every step, there are those who will never step into the light." I understood what he was trying to say. We were all part of that game, one no one enters voluntarily, but one that was impossible to leave. "Tell me, who's behind this?" I demanded. "I need to know." He looked at me again, and his eyes filled with concern. "Those who control this industry, the ones who make the decisions. You think fashion is just a career, right? But fashion is business. It's a system that decides who rises to the top and who disappears. You've already gone too far, Emily." I felt the air get heavier, and it became harder to breathe. All of this was becoming too real, and I realized that maybe I had gotten lost in this world far deeper than I wanted to admit. I was just one of the models, and everything around me was connected to unimaginable forces that could destroy me. What should I do? I asked, no longer hoping for an easy answer. You need to be ready for what will be revealed, and if you continue, know that you won't be able to turn back. His voice grew cold, and he looked away again. You have to decide if you really want to know. I stood there, filled with fear and determination. There were no stops on this path, and I knew that if I wanted answers, I would have to face what was hidden behind closed doors. If you enjoyed this video story and want to find out what happens next, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's more exciting twists, secrets, and unexpected revelations ahead. Write in the comments what you think. Who is behind the disappearances of the models, and what awaits Emily in this deadly game? Your opinions mean a lot to me, and I look forward to reading them. Share this video with your friends so they can dive into this world of fashion and mystery with you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, where we continue to investigate the most dangerous secrets of the fashion world.